know what that means. My understanding is, Malcolm, that we are talking on the same range of subjects that we discussed in New York a few weeks ago in December. And I will start off with some comments along the lines that, as I remember, we made in New York.
Perfect.
At that time, the third plenum had just been completed. After that, we had about a month later the Economic Work Conference, which is a very important event in the calendar of China's economic decision-making processes, as you know. But let me go back to the third plenum, what I see as the most important points. 4 points. Xi Jinping is establishing himself in the tradition of Deng Xiaoping as a great reformer. He has obviously used this third plenum as an occasion to reaffirm his government's commitment, his personal and his government's commitment to the fundamental reforms that were started at the end of the first third plenum in December of 1979. This is an important event because apart from the first third plenum in this series of economic reforms in December of 79, we've had only one third plenum that was truly important. That was in November of 93. The third plenum we had at the end of 2003, at the beginning of the previous government, was a bit of a flop. It did not really set out a roadmap for the next 10 years, as the current agenda suggests. We now have a more comprehensive roadmap for economic and social reform than we have had ever, in my opinion. So it's a very important document. The 60 decisions were reflected in the document that came out a few days after the end of the third plenum. And the 60 decisions are all focused on economic and social matters, except for 3. Important to note that we also have some non-economic initiatives, some modifications of the one-child family policy, an end to the forced labor work camps, and a commitment to fundamentally reform the hukou system. In addition, there are indications that the judiciary will be given greater independence, although much of that remains unclear. So we have a document which is a more detailed roadmap for economic reform than we've ever had before, in my opinion. So it is important politically, economically, but the proof will be in the pudding. Over the years that I have been following China, I've learned to pay attention to the announcements, but even more attention to what they actually do. So implementation is the key here. We will probably see a whole series of specific decisions over the next year or two, some of which will take many, many years to implement and have full effect. The hukou reform is perhaps the most important social dimension of what has been announced. Hukou reform is fundamentally important to the structure and organization of China's society. It's very important fiscal consequences, social consequences, and will help, if it is going to be done the way I expect it, be enormously important for the economic rebalancing. One of the reasons why the savings rate in China is so high is that such a large percentage of the urban population is effectively excluded from many social security benefits, and therefore they only have their own savings to fall back upon. Once the hukou system has been abolished, as will probably take at least 10 years, the need for personal savings will become less pressing, and that will help in the rebalancing of the economy.
Peter, excuse me, could you turn your volume down? We're getting some feedback. Can you turn the volume on your speaker down just a little bit?
Oh, how do I do that?
Well, don't worry about it. Just keep going. It's not that bad.
I'll sit a little bit further away because I hear an echo, which is
yes,
very
that'll be
disturbing.
perfect. That's perfect.
I don't see a volume control button.
Don't worry about it. Please continue.
Yeah. The main challenges for the next 5 to 10 years then that I see that flow out of the third plenum decisions is to really take more seriously the economic rebalancing objectives, reducing the share of investment in the growth pattern, increasing the share of household consumption and government consumption. The leadership seems to have accepted the need for even the desirability of lower GDP growth. The emphasis is much less on raw growth than it used to be in the past, particularly in the preceding 10 years, and that is a hopeful sign. Whether that can be achieved is at this moment hard to answer because we have a rather pressing over-leveraging problem, particularly in the corporate sector. So this slowdown in economic growth combined with rebalancing has to be achieved while reducing the growth in credit. It's not strictly deleveraging as we had in the US, but slower leveraging at all levels in the economy. At the same time, there's a lot of talk about emphasis on the need to further complete the financial sector reforms, and there's a whole slew of challenges ahead, including, of course, the establishment of private banks. They've been talking about that for a long time. The imposition or the establishment of a deposit insurance system, which has been talked about for more than 10 years, now finally seems to be moving to the front of the agenda. At the same time, we have to accomplish this while controlling more actively the runaway shadow banking system, which has emerged especially since 2009. So there is a minefield of challenges and potential pitfalls ahead through which we will have to walk over the next several years to maintain stability and at least a reasonable growth momentum. The biggest vulnerability I see lies in the possibility that the real estate sector will turn around fairly abruptly. If you look at the overall supply-demand balances in urban real estate, particularly residential real estate, there is a likelihood that we'll move from an excess demand picture to perhaps an excess supply picture in the second half of this year. Should that lead to a decline, a relatively sharp decline in prices, then the challenge of maintaining financial stability will be even greater than it is today. I don't believe that the much talked about debt problem is really the principal challenge facing the system at the present time. There obviously has been a vast increase in the rate of debt accumulation, particularly in the corporate sector, also local government sector, but I don't see right now that is going to be a real problem for the system to deal with. To me, the whole debt problem remains manageable, even though it has to be watched very, very carefully. The main challenges are therefore structural. How to get the manufacturing part of the economy to adjust to the rapidly rising cost structures, labor costs, land costs, utility costs, and how to achieve that without reductions or overly fast slowdown in the rate of manufacturing output. The provisional PMI indicators for the manufacturing sector for January, of course, we only have the preliminary numbers, suggest that the slowdown that started or that continued in the last quarter of last year will continue in the next quarter. So the overall growth momentum will probably slow in 2014, although I remain optimistic that for the year as a whole, they will have no trouble hitting the 7.5%, perhaps even better. Um, there's relatively little on SOE reform in the Plenum document, but there's no doubt in my mind that they want to be serious about it. The main form will not be privatization, but to expose the SOEs to more intense competition, both amongst themselves and with the private sector, and to imports. Tell me, Malcolm, when I've run out of time, because I could fill the entire hour.
Let's stop here, and we'll let's stop here, and we'll let you continue your remarks in the context of the Q&A and discussion. How about that?
All right. I think that's very, very good.
Thank you so much. John, are you back online here?
I'm back online, but I have a very unstable connection. I don't know what if they're digging up the streets in Brooklyn or what.
Well, I'll pick up if you fall. If your connection fails, I'll pick up. Please take over while you're connected.
Peter, there's been a report out today about. I'll just ask one question now before we move on to Chung-Li about the size of the Chinese economy and the difficulty in measuring it. Apropos of the private banking, and I was wondering if you happen to have seen that, and what is your view?
Well, I have not seen the particular comment to which you refer, but we all the China watchers know that there are very significant problems with the statistical measurement of the economy. I believe that the quality of the NBS statistics, National Bureau of Statistics, has continuously improved over time, and that there is no deliberate effort on the part of the party or the government to falsify significant economic numbers. The main difficulty we have is that the statistical system is still in a state of evolving from the quantitative material balances, the old Russian-style material balances system that was inherited in the late 70s. In addition to that transition to the modern value-added based statistics of national accounts, we have the huge problem that the economy is changing so fast, and that the composition of ownership in the economy is changing equally fast. The NBS relied on a system of measuring developments in the public sector, state enterprises. Now, more than half the economy is non-state, and the statistical observation systems are not fully adjusted to the fact that so much of the economy is now non-state. So I have not seen the particular comment to which you refer, but I don't believe that there is a new problem. We have been dealing with statistical measurement problems for many years. I think they're making progress. I think we have no better sources in any event.
Thanks, Peter. Moving on to Chung-Li, who can enlighten us about some of the developments since we last met, hopefully in particular related to the composition of the two leading groups, whose members now I think are for the most part known. But over to you in DC, Chung-Li.
Thank you, John. And, thank you for the invitation. And as some of you may know, I was optimistic about the third Plenum prior to the meeting and also after the meeting. And also now optimistic about the implementation at present. My optimism is not based on political naivety or wishful thinking, but instead actually based on an understanding of serious challenges that Xi Jinping faces, and therefore the sense of urgency for his leadership. Now, I want to make two points. First is the economic and social political conditions that Xi Jinping confronts. Second is that the assessment of his current status of the reform agenda, especially regarding implementation. And thirdly, we'll share with you about the timetable. Now, first one, the economic and social political conditions. That really explains why Xi Jinping takes that very ambitious reform agenda. Because that first of the difficulties in terms of the changes of economic structure, as Peter just mentioned, from an export-led, labor-intensive economy to an innovation-driven and consumption-led economy. Very, very difficult. But without that transition, China's economy will be in big trouble. Second, related with the middle class unhappiness under Hu Jintao and Wen Jiabao. And because of a state monopoly, although the reason for that state monopoly probably is more complicated, it's unfair to blame Hu Jintao, Wen Jiabao. But that was the phenomenon over the past 10 years, the state monopoly and the shrinking of the private sector, and especially shrinking of the middle class. There's no investment opportunity for middle class except the property. Therefore, you led to some other problem like local debts, shadow banking, overcapacity, and of course, property bubble, some of the problems that Peter also highlighted. Now, this is also related to the fact that Xi Jinping used the term Chinese dream as his the overall objective, that to promote middle-class development, to have a middle-class lifestyle, to provide opportunity for low-class become members of middle class. That's the overall agenda. Now, thirdly, it's the corruption, the rampancy of the official corruption in the light of the recent scandal, started with Bo Xilai, then Railroad Minister Liu Zijun, Zhou Yongkang, and also Gu Junshan in the military. These are all very, very sensational and really outraged. And as the public start to know some of the really dirty business. Now, therefore, for Xi Jinping, he needs to take a reform agenda which is big and broad and bold before too late. So just 2 days ago, he delivered a major speech in the establishment of the economic leading group for reform, as John just mentioned. He used a metaphor because this is a year of a horse in China. The metaphor is that China should, like a horse, should run fast, but with steady steps. This is the term has become a headline of Chinese coverage about the establishment of the leading reform group in the top leadership. Now, this leads me to the second one, to assess his policies and also implementations. As we know that the third Plenum lay out 15 areas, 60 tasks, and over 300 policies. These are very detailed. You really have never seen this kind of detailed reform plan with 300 policies and 60 tasks. Now, also, not only these policies, but also they established two new important institutions to coordinate a domestic and foreign policy, especially to want to accelerate the economic reform throughout the country. And we know that the announcement of the China's leading group for overall reform, and I will go back to that in a minute, and we will soon to know the makeup of the National Security Committee. Now, also, in the past few months, that Xi Jinping really very aggressively promoted his confidants and longtime friends to three important leadership organs. Started with organization. This is it's a personnel and in charge of a personnel appointment. The second is propaganda, as we know that the Chinese system really heavily rely on the publicity and the propaganda. It was the case before and still the case now. And thirdly, it's a military. In all these three areas, now his people are well positioned. And I'm just finishing an article on that subject. Now, and also that he really with the help of Wang Qishan, as many of you know well, as the anti-corruption czar, and Wang Qishan certainly his most important political ally. So the anti-corruption campaign really gets a lot of momentum. And as we know, over the past year, 19 vice ministers and vice governors are arrested. And this includes the head of the Sussex company and the state-owned enterprises, the head. And also, they arrested, in addition to these 19 people, and include a lot of people, CEO, executives in oil, telecommunications, railways, and utility. And also 4 members of the Central Committee, 18th Central Committee, and are also purged, including 2 full members and 2 alternate members. This is quite remarkable. Within a year, they are now raised serious, jail terms. And most importantly, the investigation of Zhou Yongkang, the former Power Bureau Standing Committee member, is really getting momentum. Now, as also we know that just 2 days ago, they announced 6 subgroups in the economic leading group for reform that include the areas of economy and ecological development, governance and the law, especially emphasize judicial independence, and cultural development, as we know that the cultural industry has become an industry in China, and like music, entertainment, and etc. So they also established like so-called cultural development, and the social welfare, party building, and finally discipline inspection. These are the 6 areas. You see that it's not only just economic reform, but also linked to legal reform and the party's own disciplinary inspection and consolidating some of the other changes in social welfare, ecological development, and etc. Now, as I said, that Xi Jinping used the term faster. What I said earlier on just really reflects this, the faster, but not. He also concerned about the steady steps. This could be evident in the case of in the new leading group, they appointed Li Keqiang as deputy head of the leading group. So that certainly, it's not like a rumor said that Li Keqiang is completely marginalized. Certainly, they pay attention and try to coordinate with Premier Li. So not to just embarrass him or marginalize him too much. And also the way they handle Zhou Yongkang has been very, very cautious. Also past 2 days or 3 days. And Xu Caihou, a military figure, former vice chairman of CMC, appeared on the national TV. So I think that he is safe, at least now, highly likely will be in the future. And also another confidant of Zhou Yongkang, the person in charge of the superior prosecutor, also appeared in yesterday's meetings, and Cao Jianming, so he is also safe. So that's a clear message that they will not do too excessive purge in the Zhou Yongkang case. So that certainly, it's a very careful and, in my view, smart move. And finally, they also established a provincial leading group for overall reform in each and every province. So that's really the way to reinforce the implementation in the local level. Now, this is my assessment. I think in general, it's very, very good. And also, according to some Chinese scholars, they look at the 60 tasks, 23 of them already in the working, or some of them already implemented completely. So it's not something just an empty promise. So now this is related to the timetable, because the whole reform has a clear timetable. For example, Shanghai Free Trade Zone will be completed in 3 years, and the interest rate liberalization will be also completed in 3 years, and the RMB convertibility will be completed in 6 to 7 years, and the whole reform plan will be completed in 7 to 8 years. Now, why this year? These are all related to the timetable of the next round of political succession in just 3 or 4 years, because the current top leaders, 7 members of the Power Bureau Standing Committee, 5 of them will retire. So Xi Jinping needs to get things done before that to give him political capital, to appoint his proteges to important leadership position, to have a much better second term. So that's the timetable. That's why he needs to really deliver these kind of policies. Now, there's some risks. I should also mention, the risk could come from the leadership tensions, because it sounds like Xi Jinping really controls so many things. There'll be some of the leaders may not be happy, especially his anti-corruption campaign could make a lot of local leaders very nervous. So we need to monitor that very, very closely. And also now they start talking about legal reform, talk about the judicial independence. Now the China's liberal intellectuals will take it as an opportunity to push for real political change. So you will see that legal scholars and liberal intellectuals will fight very, tough in the months and the years to come. They will articulate they will challenge some of the cases or every cases that on the national spot. So that's not easy for the leadership who want to maintain social stability. And finally, is the issue of Japan. I think that's the tension is there, the risk is there. China's military, elites become increasingly important, and the Chinese nationalism is still on the rise. That may also put the leadership and Xi Jinping's reform policy, reform agenda into test. So I want to stop here and look forward to your questions.
Thanks very much, Chung. That was excellent. Just a couple of quick questions before we turn this over for discussion with the general group. You mentioned judicial reforms in the offing. It's interesting that you say that liberal reformers would be encouraged. On the other hand, at the same time, we have the trial of Xu Zhiyong that just took place, and the judgment of which we haven't heard yet. You think that the leadership is going to give with one hand and take away with the other? What's the strategy?
Well, they always try to have what the Chinese call kill chicken to steal the monkeys. But it's getting increasingly difficult because there are so many chickens and the monkeys are not necessarily scared. So that's the challenge that we face. So the Xu Zhiyong case will be very, very difficult because that person has very strong moral high ground. It's a PhD from Peking University in law, a very humble and down-to-earth person, not necessarily radical, and he really worked very hard for human rights improvement, for the emerging of Chinese society, civil society. So I think that the leadership need to be very careful, otherwise the most public will be sympathetic with him. But on the other hand, this is precisely what I said the difficulties. And not only particularly Xu Zhiyong case will be quite difficult for leadership to gain points. And but there are some other cases in the future. If you really want to deal with Zhou Yongkang, and you should have an open trial, that's the most difficult part. And there's another wave of challenge. So I would say that the leadership probably should be very, very careful. They did very well in Bo Xilai's trial, but Zhou Yongkang and Xu Zhiyong and many other cases will be quite different. But the important thing is that they now emphasize the courts in various levels to the report to their superior courts rather than to their local government they belong to. Now that certainly can reduce the power of youth. As we know, that the Bo Xilai's abuse of power and the police brutality largely based on the fact that he controlled Chongqing court to report to Bo Xilai, not to the superior court. So that can reduce some of the problems. So that's an encouraging development.
Thank you. Let's go back to one other question, economic related, that you mentioned. Cheng-Li, you said that the middle class is feeling pressure, and this is the major driver for the reforms that Xi Jinping is pushing. I think this is interesting because if we think back to 1989, the time for urban residents, not from rural residents, and a lot of the policies that followed upon in the wake of 1989, June 4th, were designed to help urban residents do better, and to a large extent that they succeeded. Is that something that, Peter, you have the same sense that the middle class has been struggling a little bit recently, and that this is one of the drivers for reform?
Well, I think I'll leave the floor to Cheng-Li on that because he raised the subject. I think there are all sorts of things going on, and some of them show conflicting tendencies. The great problem in the middle class, you might say, at the moment, is that young university graduates cannot find jobs. Another problem that affects particularly young people is that they can no longer hope to become homeowners in some of the major cities. So in that sense, that part of the emerging middle class is very squeezed. Another phenomenon which sort of balances this to some extent is that wages for blue-collar workers are rising very fast in spite of the economic slowdown. We still have 8 to 10% real wage growth in the economy. The picture for the ordinary workers, construction workers, manufacturing workers is very different from that of the relative elite who have been to college and university. So I'll leave it to Chang Li to elaborate more on what is happening more generally to the middle class.
Peter, we have a question from one of our participants about, could you tell us more about why you think this year will move from undersupply to oversupply in housing? Could you comment more about that?
Well, I've been following the statistics on housing starts and, of course, market transactions. And most of the people who make it their business to follow the housing market suggest that we will go to a much more balanced demand-supply situation in most large cities in the course of the current calendar year. Some even predict that we will move to an excess supply situation from the middle of this year onward. I have no independent way of checking that. It's a huge field. It's very difficult, and different experts have different opinions. But I think the extremely fast property price increases that we have seen over the past 9 months are probably going to be a thing of the past.
And what are the implications? Yeah, please go ahead. Do you have another comment about this question? We're open this to the field if anybody else would like to pipe in. Take your.
Yes, it's a related question. It's actually, it's thinking where their policy on the yuan is going to be, and whether they'd continue the appreciation given the wage situation there. So it just strikes me that there's no way the yuan is actually undervalued at this point.
If the question is meant for me, I'm sorry to say I didn't get it clearly. The audio function is clearly a little problematic.
Let me repeat the question, Peter. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you very clearly. The previous speaker I could not hear clearly.
Okay. The question is, do you think the RMB is going to continue to appreciate? His view is that it has no upside.
Well,
yeah, really, that's because of the wage differentials. And
my personal expectation is that there will continue to be very small RMB appreciation in the next 12 months. The non-deliverable forward market indicates only about 2 or 3% for the year as a whole. If you look at what is happening in the last few weeks, it might indicate that the appreciation is going to be fast and that we will end the year well below 6 renminbi to the dollar. This may be surprising to many because the economy has slowed down. Many exporters are struggling, but there are other centers of strength in the economy which would indicate the desirability of allowing greater flexibility and allowing some further appreciation.
I had a question.
Well, the floor is open, so if we have any other questions or comments, please either send them in as a chat or just speak with your.
Is mine working? So
yes, I
wanted to ask a quick question about infrastructure spending, and specifically how we should think about the impact of the third plenum on infrastructure spending, because you've got the positives of what seems like urbanization, but at the same time a desire to shift towards a more consumer-driven economy.
Yeah, this is one of the big issues. I think the proportion of total capital formation that will be allocated to infrastructure will decline, and the rate of increase in spending on infrastructure will also decline. And this is primarily a function of the need to control the debt accumulation on the part of local government. Beijing has become very concerned that the rate of increase in local government debt has been much too much in the last two and a half years. And since most of the money mobilized, borrowed mostly by local government is voted is allocated to infrastructure, the overall infrastructure investment in the economy as a whole is likely to slow down.
I want to add, there's a lot of different views about urbanization, whether it's a good idea, about the timing, about the format of urbanization, whether center around the big cities or really promote the small and medium-sized towns. And a lot of negative views, criticism. I think that bottom line is that the government is not in the mood to have another stimulus plan. That's very clear. And yes, there will be some infrastructure development, but this should be the based on the condition that the consumption, the private sector development, the banking reform will go ahead. So the sequence of the changes is very, very important. This is related to what John's question about urban versus rural. Now, at the moment, that the urban has a lot of area, have a lot of problems. So the basic strategy is to first to promote the urban development, particularly the private sector financial reform. When the things get better, there's a service sector become more dynamic, then they can open more and allow more migration. And also there's emphasis on agriculture development. So it's not necessarily just a one way around. Sometimes some people argue that to promote the rural development is equally important.
So there's not necessarily a pressure to start building to create space for urbanization yet. It's not. There's no immediacy to kind of that process.
Well, some leaders want to push that, but I don't think Xi Jinping and his chief advisors are crazy about that. Certainly not on their top agenda. They did have a meeting about 2 months ago, 1 month and a half ago, on urbanization, but you do not see any specific result. That reflects some of the internal debate in China.
Any other comments or questions? One, I'd just like to add on infrastructure spending. It's interesting that what the Premier Li Keqiang did last year was corporatize the Ministry of Railways. One of the reasons is to railway development to private investment. There was no capital for this from other sources besides government debt. One question, please feel free to interrupt me because this is really about you all participating and asking questions or making comments that are near and dear to your heart. So I'll be quiet for a second.
The other question I wanted to make sure I asked was, you've seen signs that credit in China has been, the credit availability has been tighter than previously, but you haven't yet seen that really impact growth. I mean, growth was slightly weaker, but not a credit shock like that would have in the mature markets. Is that something is there something that's creating that disconnection, or is it just a lag and we're going to see that in the first quarter?
That's for you, Peter.
Yeah, I'm very disappointed with the quality of the audio. I understand the question to be whether the efforts by the government to slow down the rate of credit increase is having a negative effect on growth and what's all behind it. It's obvious that the rate of monetary expansion and general credit expansion, specifically since the stimulus program that was started at the end of 2008, has been excessive. This has led to an accumulation of debt at various levels in the economy, which has begun to worry the authorities. What we have seen, particularly in the last 6 months, is a willingness on the part of the monetary authorities to allow short-term interest rates to creep up. They've crept up the SHIBOR, the Shanghai Interbank rate has increased by 300 basis points over a period of about 3.5 months. That's a very significant increase. In addition to that, you see that efforts have been made to close the interbank market for certain types of transactions, because many of the shadow banking operators were financing themselves by borrowing very short-term, 7 days maximum, on the interbank market, and the government has significantly tightened the controls on that. Generally, if you look at China's growth pattern over the past 20 years, there has been a very close correlation between the rate of credit expansion and GDP growth. That is still the case today. One of the main reasons why so many analysts expect growth in 2014 to fall below 2013 is that there is now a clearly perceived need for slowing down credit expansion, and the central bank is precisely doing that. Whether that will actually translate into slower growth, it remains to be seen, because there are many other dynamics going on that point in an opposite direction. You see a lot of restructuring going on in manufacturing. You see an upgrading of labor conditions, labor quality, which suggests that the potential for significant productivity increase in manufacturing, and also, I might add, in the service sectors, is still very high. That could counteract a slowdown in credit expansion. That's why earlier on I suggested that growth in 2014 may in fact be as good as it was in 2013, 7.5%. Or even better. Most people predict somewhere between 7 and 7.5%. But the key question is monetary management, financial system reform in general in the next 12 months. I can't hear you, John. Are you?
There, can you hear me now?
Yes, now I can.
Okay, my apologies. Just a quick logistical note. I think we can all see the little chat things that pop up on our screen, and a few people have made suggestions about audio, so please do take note. And if you are speaking on the phone, try to move away from your computer so you don't have the computer also picking up your audio and creating a problem. My question for Cheng-Li really is about the possibility, about really what's going on between Japan and China. And is there any, what are your calculations of the risk that something significant happens in terms of warships or true conflict between these two countries?
Well, first of all, that Xi Jinping does not want to go to war. I don't think any leaders in the region want to go to war, including Japanese top leader. But the problem is that, as we know, that some war took place, not because of leaders wanted to go, but because of they do not have a choice. They are put into a corner. So current period is very, very dangerous, because nationalism in both China and Japan is on the rise. And the Chinese people, by general, really very angry about Japanese politicians, and they never apologize, and they continue to show they are kind of unnecessary, provocative, and this is sort of Chinese national sentiment. So there's a lot, various forces in China wanted to have some kind of a conflict with Japan. And of course, this usually comes from, men on the street, not by senior leaders. But some of the military figures want to push for their agenda. So if there's some incidents, I think that Xi Jinping really will be forced to do something tough. And but that will also cause action from Japan, from the United States. At the moment, China refused to talk to Japanese leaders. At the same time, they launched a very impressive campaign that China's 40 ambassadors started to publish opinion pieces and try to have a debate with Japanese ambassadors. Actually, they are quite successful. They really created a situation that the island of dispute, it should be on the table. So in a way, Japanese actually made a mistake. To now they start to debate, then become the issue is real. So this is the purpose. China wants the Japanese government to acknowledge that the Diaoyu Island is it's a controversial issue, and it's by no means resolved in the Japanese favor. So in that regard, China pushed very, very aggressively on the diplomatic front. At the same time, that the Chinese now continue to prepare for a war if that happens. But in leadership's mind, they don't want to have war. They may not win. Secondly, they understand that China's history repeatedly indicate sometimes external war will cause domestic revolution or regime change. So this is area they don't want to touch.
Excuse me, would everybody who's not speaking please turn his or her audio off, so we're still having a feedback problem. Please go to the little microphone icon at the bottom left of your screen. Kim, do you see it? Could you mute that, please?
I don't think, I think I'm on, my audio's off on my computer, and I'm muted on the phone.
Oh, okay, either one. Just as long as one of the others muted, that's good. Okay, let's try it again. Sorry, folks. John, take it away.
Any additional comments, questions? One for
John, could I make a question on this Japan? John, could I make a question on the Japan-China situation?
Peter, we seem to have lost you now. Could you start again? Peter, we seem to have lost you. Would you please start your comment again?
But the only comment I'd like to make is that given the emphasis on economic reform, economic development at the third plenum of the December, all the speeches that we've seen since the time, my sense is that the priority will remain domestic economic development, improving the economic stability, financial reform, and that the extraordinarily complicated external situation priorities. But that doesn't mean that we have no huge uncertainty, because all sorts of accidents can happen. I'm saying, of course, only applies to China. Mr. Abe, Mr. Kuroda on the other side.
Peter, we seem to have lost you.
In Tokyo are fighting to defeat inflation, and Peter, I think their priority probably like the economic agenda, not on the strategic agenda.
I think I can summarize just briefly. I caught enough of what Peter said to just summarize that you believe that the economic reform and economic growth agenda is far and away the most important, both for the Chinese and Japanese sides. That doesn't discount the possibility of an accident happening, and one should be cautious about this. Yeah, I agree with that entirely. Yeah. Absolutely. And therefore, stories that just, I don't know if you all saw the story that came out of the FT, somebody attending Davos reported on a comment made by a Chinese professional, quote unquote, to the effect that they expect, that this person expects a war, military action to be limited, but this scared the liver out of the correspondent who was reporting about this. And there will be plenty of opportunities for similar types of news to come out in the future, but one should, I think, be cautious and discount nearly all of it unless something really serious happens. Malcolm, we're just about running out of time. Did you have any
John, I'm afraid I've lost you there. I seem to have lost you there. I'm sorry, I lost you there. Could you repeat that, please?
I was just saying, do you have any, Malcolm, we're just about out of time. Do you close?
Okay, well, the one thing, the first thing I would like to do is any of you who haven't had a question here, or if one comes up after you finish, please email me, and I will do my best to get your answer. We want to be sure that this works well for you. I would also like to be able to, if I could, to have a follow-up conversation with you, just to find ways to do this better. And finally, any of you who are not members of the of China Debate, please contact me. We'll talk about membership. But primarily, I just thank you all for attending. Before we stop, are there any urgent questions, last-minute comments by anybody? I'll take that as a no. And we're at time right now, so we've done very well. Chung Lee, Peter, John, and all the participants, thank you all so much for your attendance today and great presentations. Excuse me just a minute here. Oh, good. Excellent. I'm starting to get the comments in. Anyway, thank you all so much. And until I see you again, either privately at the China Roundtable on February 26th, where we have another great program set up, or at another video conference. Let me just wish you all well in your endeavors related to China. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Malcolm.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.